The auction hall. The auction hall was filled with strange lights and louder whispers. Creatures from many worlds sat in rows, waiting to see the next item to be sold. The air was heavy with fear and greed, mixed together like smoke. On the stage stood a strong cage made of shining steel. Inside it, a girl stood tall, silent, and chained. Her skin had marks that glowed like blue fire under the lights. Her long silver hair fell over her shoulders. Wild and untamed, her eyes, bright amber, stared at everyone like fire burning through glass. She was the wild alien, the one that no one dared to buy. The auctioneer, a short alien with 4 arms, shouted loudly, 50% off. Half price for the wild one, he said, trying to sound brave. She's strong, fast, and rare, but hard to control, he added quickly. No one moved, no one raised a hand. Everyone looked away when her golden eyes met theirs. The girl pulled her chains once, making a loud clink that echoed through the hall. A few buyers jumped back in fear. She killed her last owner, someone whispered. She can tear steel apart with her hands, another said. Rumors flew like insects, even the guards looked nervous. Keeping their weapons ready for a moment, the auctioneer's voice trembled. He looked desperate, his smile shaking. Anyone? She's 50% off, he repeated. Still no one spoke. The hall was silent. Then a calm voice came from the back. I'll take her, the voice said. Everyone turned. A human man stood there, tall, wearing a simple brown coat and gloves. His face was half hidden by the hood of his jacket, but his eyes looked straight at the stage, calm and steady. You will take her? The auctioneer stuttered. The man nodded once. Yes, he said, his voice quiet but sure. The crowd began to murmur. A human? Buying her. Someone said he must be insane. But the human didn't care. He walked forward slowly, placed the credits on the counter, and said again, She's mine. The hammer fell. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. Sold to the human, the auctioneer shouted. The guards moved fast, dragging the girl out of the cage. Her chains rattled, her eyes filled with fire, but when she saw the human up close, she froze. He didn't show fear. He didn't stare at her like she was a beast. He simply stood there looking at her quietly. For a moment, the wild alien didn't know what to do. Outside, under the twin moons, the guard shoved her toward him. She's your problem now, one of them said. Backing away quickly, the human looked at her hands, then reached into his coat and unlocked her cuffs. The alien girl blinked, surprised. You let me go? She said in a low voice, her tone sharp and unsure. The man looked at her and replied softly, I didn't buy you to cage you. I bought you because no one else should. The girl stared at him, her golden eyes wide. For the first time, her expression changed. It was no longer anger, it was confusion, and maybe somewhere deep inside a tiny spark of hope. The man turned and began walking away down the quiet street. After a short moment, the girl followed him, her chains now hanging loose. The crowd inside the hall whispered again, Who was that human? Why would he buy her? Is he trying to die? But the man didn't turn back. The alien girl followed in silence, her steps slow and careful, and above them, the moons watched as something new began that night. Not ownership, not fear, but the beginning of a strange and fragile trust. The wild one's eyes. The road outside the auction hall was quiet. Only the sound of the wind and the soft clinking of chains followed the human and the alien girl. He walked slowly, not turning around. While she followed from a distance, her golden eyes never left his back. Filled with confusion and suspicion, she had never met someone like him. Every master before had shouted, hit, or tried to break her will, but this one didn't speak unless needed. He didn't look at her with hunger or fear, only calm eyes that hid something she couldn't read. They reached a small transport ship, old but clean. He opened the door and motioned for her to enter. The alien girl hesitated, thinking it was another trap. The human looked back at her and said quietly, You can stay or come. Your choice. No one had ever given her a choice before. Slowly, she stepped inside. The ship smelled of metal, coffee, and dust. She looked around but saw no cages, no chains, no control collars, only simple furniture, a bed, and tools scattered on the floor. The human walked past her, poured water into a glass, and placed it on the table. Drink, he said. The girl didn't move at first, her eyes sharp and watchful, but her throat was dry. So she finally picked it up and drank carefully. The silence between them grew heavy. The man finally said, My name's Cade. The girl didn't answer. He didn't ask for hers. He simply turned to his small console and began working. She sat down in the corner, still ready to attack if needed. Hours passed through the small window. She watched the stars move. The engines hummed softly. She wanted to ask why he bought her, but the words wouldn't come in her world. Words had always been punished. Silence was safer. Later, when the ship entered dark space, a sudden sound echoed from outside. Something hit the hull hard. Cade stood up quickly, checking the radar. "Pirates," he said calmly. Pressing switches, the alien girl stood too, her chains clinking as she moved closer. Through the window, bright flashes appeared, small ships approaching fast. "Stay here," he ordered, but she ignored him. Her instinct screamed for battle. When the first blast hit, Cade stumbled, sparks flying across the console. The girl rushed forward without thinking, grabbing his arm and pulling him down just before another shot shattered the glass above. For a few seconds, their eyes met. Her golden eyes burned like fire, and his gray ones reflected calm steel. He wasn't afraid even now. He pointed to the side hatch. "Can you fight?" She gave a small, fierce smile. "Better than you." The next few minutes were chaos. She moved with impossible speed, dodging lasers, striking back with her bare hands and claws. Cade fired his weapon from behind cover, aiming with care. Together, they forced the pirates to retreat into the black void. The silence that followed was deep and cold. Cade looked at her, breathing hard. Blood ran down her arm from a small cut, but she didn't care. "You saved me," he said, surprised. The alien girl looked away, her voice low. "You are my buyer," she said. "If you die, my chains remain." But Cade smiled a little. "Then maybe you're not as wild as they said." For a long moment, she looked into his eyes. Something changed inside her chest, something warm she didn't understand. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "My name is Sira." Cade nodded slowly. "Then, Sira, you're free to stay or go," he said quietly. Her eyes widened again, confused by his words, free. The word felt strange in her mouth. She didn't answer, but when Cade turned away, she sat down near him, closer this time. And outside the window, the stars kept moving. Two souls from different worlds, beginning a bond neither of them expected. The hidden planet. The stars stretched endlessly before them as the ship moved through the silent dark. Sira sat beside Cade in the cockpit, her eyes fixed on the glowing map that floated in front of them. Lines of light traced star routes, most of them marked as forbidden zones. Her finger hovered over one blinking red dot at the edge of the map. "There," she said quietly. "That's where my people used to live." Cade leaned closer, the screen's glow painting his face in blue light. "It's off the charts," he murmured. "A dead system. No signals for years." Sira nodded slowly, her voice firm. "That's what they want everyone to think." He turned toward her, his expression thoughtful. "Then that's where we'll go," he said simply. No hesitation, no fear, and for the first time, Sira realized he meant it. He wasn't doing this out of pity or duty. He truly cared. As the ship jumped into warp, the stars turned into long ribbons of light. Sira closed her eyes and breathed slowly. She remembered the songs her people used to sing before battle. Now only echoes of those voices lived inside her. Hours later, the ship dropped out of warp. A small planet appeared ahead, half hidden by dust clouds and debris. It looked silent, abandoned, broken. But Sira's heart began to race. "I know this place," she whispered. Her fingers pressed against the glass, trembling slightly. They descended through the thick gray clouds. Lightning flashed across the sky and the wind screamed like a living thing. When they landed, Sira stepped out first, her boots sinking into soft ash. The ground was covered in ruins, stone towers fallen, burnt metal buried under sand, but beneath it all she felt something, a heartbeat faint and deep, calling from the soil. Cade followed her quietly, scanning the area with his handheld device. "No power readings, no life signs," he said. Sira shook her head, her voice low. "They're here. Just not on the surface." She led him toward a cracked monument half buried in dust. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its side, reacting to her touch. Cade watched in awe as the ground began to shift. A hidden door opened beneath the monument, releasing a gust of warm air from below. "Underground," she said, her voice almost trembling. "They built safe chambers before the war." Cade followed her down the narrow staircase. Light flickering from the walls at the bottom, a long tunnel opened into a wide chamber, and there, dimly lit by glowing crystals, stood dozens of cryopods. Covered in dust, Sierra froze, her eyes wide with shock. Inside the pods lay her people, sleeping, unmoving. Men, women, and children, all waiting for a time that never came. Her hand shook as she placed it on the nearest pod. "This was my commander," she whispered. She swore to wake them when the war ended. Cade looked around the chamber, realizing what they had found. "They've been here for years," he said softly. "Centuries," Sierra replied, her voice breaking, her eyes filled with tears, glowing faintly in the dim light. They were betrayed. Someone shut down the system. Cade stepped closer to the control panel. Wiping away the thick dust, he pulled out his tools and began reconnecting wires. "Then we'll wake them," he said simply. Sierra turned to him in disbelief. "You would help me?" Cade looked at her with steady eyes. "You helped me survive pirates." "This is nothing." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she smiled, soft, real, unguarded. "You're not like the others," she whispered. "Maybe not," he replied. "But I think I was meant to find you." The machines began to hum, lights flickering back to life. The ground trembled as air returned to the sleeping chambers. Sierra fell to her knees, tears falling freely. Cade placed a hand on her shoulder, silent but strong, and as the first pod hissed open with a low sound, a new chapter of her people's story began to breathe again. The Wild One was no longer alone. The uprising begins. The underground chamber was filled with a low humming sound. One by one, the cryopods began to glow with soft blue light. The sleeping aliens inside twitched, gasped, and opened their eyes after long years of silence. Sierra stood frozen, her heart racing as she watched her people awaken. Cade moved between the consoles, reconnecting circuits and restarting the old generators. Sparks jumped from broken panels, filling the air with the smell of dust and heat. Slowly, the once dead hull came alive again. The hum grew stronger until it sounded like the heartbeat of a sleeping world. When the first warrior stepped out of the pod, his eyes were wide with confusion. "Sierra?" he said, his voice rough and weak. She ran to him and caught his arm before he fell. "Yes, it's me," she whispered, her voice breaking. He stared at her, disbelief filling his tired face. "We lost the war. We thought everyone was gone." Sierra shook her head, her eyes burning with tears. "Not everyone," she said softly. "We were hidden, sleeping, waiting. More pods opened. More faces appeared, her friends, her soldiers, her people. But the joy was mixed with fear. The memories of war, pain, and betrayal still hung in the air like smoke." Cade stepped forward, looking out over the awakening crowd. He felt every eye turned toward him, some with confusion, others with mistrust. "Who is this human?" A tall alien asked sharply. "He helped me find you," Sierra replied firmly. Her tone carried the weight of command, and the others fell silent. Cade nodded once. "We've brought your systems back online," he said. "But we need to move fast. Someone will detect the power surge." As if answering his words, the ground above shook violently. A red alarm flashed across the chamber walls. Sierra turned sharply. "They found us," she said, her voice hard, above the planet. Dark ships were descending, slaver patrols, armed and fast, tracking the energy signature from the ancient base. Cade ran to the control station, his hands flying over the switches. "We have minutes before they land," he said. Sierra turned to her people, her voice fierce and steady, warriors of Luri. "You've slept long enough," she shouted. "The slavers are coming again. Will you hide or will you fight?" A roar rose through the chamber. Old weapons were pulled from the walls. Blades and energy rifles long forgotten came back to life. The air crackled with tension and fire. Cade armed himself beside them, his eyes locked with Sierra's. "Side by side," he said quietly. "Always," she replied, gripping her weapon. The first explosion shook the ceiling. Dust falling like rain, Sierra led the charge up the long tunnel, her voice echoing through the stone. When they reached the surface, the night sky was alive with fire. Enemy ships hovered above, dropping troops in silver armor. Sierra moved like lightning, her claws slicing through the first line. Cade fired beside her, his aim steady and calm. Her people followed, roaring in unison, their battle cries shaking the ground. It was chaos, fire, and fury, but it was also freedom. For the first time in decades, her people fought not as slaves. They fought as a family, reclaiming what was stolen. Sierra's eyes burned with golden light as she shouted orders. Her voice was stronger than ever. Echoing across the battlefield, Cade covered her back, protecting her flank from the incoming drones. "Behind you." he called. She turned fast, striking down the attacker with one clean move. Their movements fit together perfectly, as if they had fought side by side for years. When the last slaver ship tried to escape, Sira raised her hand. A powerful blast of energy burst from the ground cannons, striking it down. The crowd cheered as the flaming wreck fell across the horizon. As the smoke began to clear, Sira looked at Cade. Her face streaked with ash and light. "You didn't have to fight our war," she said quietly. He smiled faintly, wiping blood from his cheek. "Your war became mine the moment I raised my hand at that auction." She looked at him, her golden eyes soft and full of fire, and for the first time her lips curved into a real smile. Above them the sun began to rise, painting the ruins gold. The war for freedom had begun, and this time they would not lose. The first word, she spoke. The ship drifted through the quiet darkness of space. Inside, everything was calm, except for the quiet hum of the engines. Cade sat at the small control desk, fixing broken wires from the pirate attack. Sira sat near the wall, her eyes following every small movement he made. She had told him her name last night, and that one word had changed something between them. He didn't treat her like a tool or a slave. He treated her like a person. That was new to her and strange. Cade turned and noticed her watching. He smiled a little. Not the kind of smile that demanded anything, just simple and quiet. "You can rest, Sira," he said. She didn't move. "I don't sleep when someone is fixing a ship with burnt wires," she replied sharply. Cade chuckled softly. "Then maybe you should teach me how to fix it faster." Her lips twitched slightly, almost like a smile, but she looked away quickly. She didn't want to show softness, not yet. Trust was still hard. But when Cade passed her a small piece of bread, she didn't throw it away. She took it, hesitated, and ate slowly. It was the first meal she had without fear in a long time. Later, when Cade went to check the ship's hold, Sira followed him. He opened the lower hatch to inspect cargo panels. Inside, it was dark and dusty. Then suddenly the ship's alarm screamed. "Motion detected, rear section." The computer voice said. Cade spun around, weapon ready. Sira crouched low, her eyes glowing faintly. Something moved in the dark, metal claws scraping, small shadows crawling. "Boarding drones," Cade said under his breath. "Pirate machines built to steal supplies and kill the crew." 3 of them crawled out of the vent, red lights glowing like eyes. Cade fired twice, breaking one in half. But the other 2 jumped at him fast and sharp. Before he could reload, Sira moved. She leapt forward with wild speed, claws flashing through the air. She tore into one drone, ripping wires apart. The last one tried to grab her leg, but she spun, kicking it into the wall. Sparks burst out, lighting her face like gold fire. When the noise finally stopped, the room smelled like smoke and burned metal. Cade stood there staring, her chest rose and fell quickly, her hair falling over her face. "Remind me never to fight you," he said softly. Sira looked at him, her eyes sharp but tired. "You fight too slow," she replied. He smiled again, the kind of smile she still didn't understand. She turned away, wiping her arm where a small burn was forming. Cade walked closer and reached for a medical pack. "Hold still," he said. Sira frowned but didn't pull away as he gently cleaned the wound. His touch was careful, respectful, not controlling. That made her chest feel strange again, a warmth she didn't know how to name. When he finished, she looked at him quietly. Her voice came out low, almost like a whisper. "Cade," she said. He looked up in surprise. It was the first time she said his name. He didn't speak for a moment. Hearing his name in her voice felt different. Soft, unsure, but real. He smiled faintly and said, "Yes, Sira?" She hesitated, searching for words, then she simply said, "Thank you." Those 2 words hit him harder than any battle. He nodded slowly. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. But she looked straight into his eyes, her voice firm now. "No one ever fixed my wounds before." The silence between them felt heavier than before, but not cold. It was the kind of silence that meant something had changed. Sira stood, looking out the window at the endless stars. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like property. She felt alive, free, and uncertain of what would come next. Cade watched her in silence. He didn't know where this path would lead, but deep down, he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone anymore. The wild alien who once scared the galaxy had just spoken her first gentle words, and those words would change both their lives forever. The truth behind her chains days passed quietly as the ship moved through the dark stretch between systems. Cade worked on repairing damaged parts while Sierra mostly stayed near the window, watching stars drift by like silent ghosts. Sometimes they shared small words over meals. Other times, silence said more than voices ever could. One night, Cade found her sitting alone in the cargo bay. The only light came from the stars outside the thin glass wall. Her hands were resting on her knees, fingers tracing the faint scars on her wrists. He walked closer, slow and careful, not wanting to disturb her. "You still wear those?" he asked quietly, pointing to the broken chain cuffs now hanging loose like bracelets. She looked down, her expression unreadable. "I tried taking them off once," she said softly. "But they feel like a part of me now." Cade crouched beside her, his voice low. "They don't belong on you anymore." Sierra didn't answer right away. Her eyes glowed faintly as she looked into the stars. "You don't know what I did," she whispered. Cade waited, saying nothing, letting her speak in her own time. "I wasn't born in chains," she continued, her voice trembling. "My people were warriors, proud and free. We fought the invaders who came to our world." She paused, her breath shaking. "They wanted us to kneel to serve, but we never did." Her golden eyes darkened as memories flooded back. When they couldn't win, they burned our forests, captured our leaders, and branded us as savages. She showed him the faint mark on her neck. Hidden beneath her hair, a small metal chip glowed dimly. "Slave tracker," she said bitterly. "They said we were too wild to be trusted, too dangerous to live free." Cade clenched his fists, anger burning in his chest. "That's not wildness. That's strength," he said. But Sierra shook her head slowly. "They called me the last wild one because I never broke. Even when they took my family, my commander, everyone I knew." Her voice cracked at the last word, and she looked away quickly, ashamed of the tears forming in her eyes. Cade reached out slowly and touched the broken chain on her wrist. "You're not a weapon, Sierra," he said softly. "You're a survivor." She looked at him with disbelief, as if she had forgotten what kindness felt like. "No one ever said that to me before," she whispered. He gave a faint smile. "Then I'll be the first." The silence that followed felt different this time. Not empty, but full of something alive, something unspoken. Outside, a soft light from a distant star bathed the room in pale gold. Sierra stood slowly and walked closer to the window. Her reflection shimmered against the glass, chains glinting faintly. "I thought freedom meant running away," she said quietly. "But now I think it means being seen for what I truly am." Cade nodded, his voice calm. "Then that's what I see." Sierra turned, meeting his gaze fully for the first time. Her eyes were not filled with anger or pain. They were soft, steady, and alive. Her next words came slowly, carefully. "My people are still out there, hidden somewhere in the old war zones." Cade tilted his head. "Understanding you want to find them," he said. She nodded once, firm and sure. "I have to." He smiled slightly, standing up. "Then I guess that's our new mission." Sierra looked surprised. "Our?" Cade nodded again. "You didn't think I'd let you go alone, did you?" She blinked, a strange warmth spreading across her chest. For a moment she forgot the chains, the fear, the pain. For a moment she simply felt human. Together, they stood beneath the faint starlight, the wild alien and the calm human, bound not by control but by choice. And beyond the glass the stars seemed to burn brighter, as if the universe itself had begun to listen to their story. The last bid smoke still rose from the battlefield. The sun had climbed above the clouds, painting the broken ground in warm gold. Bodies of fallen machines lay scattered among the ruins. The air smelled of victory and ash. Sierra stood at the center of the destroyed auction square. It was the same place where she had once been sold in chains. Now it was silent, except for the soft wind carrying dust across the cracked stones. Her people surrounded her, tired but unbroken. They had won after years of silence. After generations of pain, they were free. Cade walked slowly toward her, his jacket torn, face streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes still burned with calm fire. He stopped beside her, his gaze falling on the ruined auction stage. "So this is where it started," he said quietly. Sierra nodded, her voice low and firm. "And this is where it ends." They began rebuilding the square together, not as slaves and masters, but as equals. Sierra ordered the old auction stand to be torn down in its place. They built a small monument, a circle of light stones carved with the names of the fallen. When it was done, she stood before her people, her golden eyes glowing softly. For years, they put prices on our lives, she said, her voice echoing across the ruins. They called us wild, savage, broken, but today, we write our own worth, her people cheered, their voices rising like thunder through the valley. Even Cade felt something deep move inside him, pride mixed with awe. That night, they held a gathering around the monument. Fires burned in circles, and the stars shone brighter than they ever had. Old songs returned, songs Sira thought she'd never hear again. Children laughed as they danced between the flames. Their chains melted into glowing rings of light. Cade sat near the edge of the fire, watching Sira from a distance. She was different now. Not just the wild one from the auction, she was a leader, strong yet gentle. Her voice carried hope instead of anger. Her people looked at her with trust, not fear. When she walked toward him, the crowd grew quiet. She stopped beside him and offered her hand. He took it, surprised. You stood with us when no one else did, she said softly. You didn't buy a slave that day, Cade. You freed a people, he looked at her hand. Then at the firelight reflecting in her golden eyes. I just did what was right, he said quietly. Sira smiled, shaking her head. No human ever came to our aid before, but you changed everything. She turned to face her people once more and raised her voice. From this day forward, no one will ever stand on that stage again. And if anyone dares to sell another life for a price, we'll remind them what freedom costs. The crowd roared in agreement, their voices carrying far into the night, and in that moment, under the twin moons, the last traces of fear vanished from their hearts. Later, when the fires dimmed and the stars shone brighter, Sira sat beside Cade on a hill overlooking the valley. You could leave now, she said quietly. Go back to your world. Cade looked at her, his eyes calm as always. Maybe I could, he said. But I won't. Sira tilted her head slightly, a small smile forming. Then where will you go? He looked out at the stars and said softly, wherever freedom still needs a voice. Sira watched him for a moment, then nodded slowly. You humans, she whispered with a faint laugh. Always trying to fix what others broke. Cade smiled back. Someone has to. As dawn began to rise over the hidden planet, the last echoes of war faded. The wild alien who once stood in chains now stood tall beside the human who chose compassion over fear. And together, they watched a new light spread across their world. No more auctions, no more masters, only hope. And the beginning of peace.